Hi, good afternoon, and welcome to today's session, Sedat HR Digest, proudly brought to us by Sedat Consult, your trusted HR partner. And as you saw, Sedat is into quite a number of services, be it staff outsourcing, talent acquisition and management, training and development, HR support, advisory, and outsourcing, amongst others. Feel free to reach out to Sedat Consult on 0244 629245 or 059 140 5555. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thanks for having time with us once more. And we will kindly ask that you share the link with your team members, share the link with your colleagues, with your friends, and invite them to join us on this educative, insightful platform. Thank you once again for having us. Well, today's session focuses on an issue that's often overlooked, yet deeply damaging: workplace incivility. It may not be as loud as something such as harassment or visible as discrimination, but its effects can be very, very, very disruptive. And whether it's being excluded from team chats or ignored during meetings or constantly being interrupted, showing attitudes of rudeness, or even sarcasm. These are all forms of incivility that erode trust and belonging. And last week, we delved on emotional intelligence, and Daniel Goleman said, in the workplace, emotional intelligence is not a luxury, but it is a basic necessity. Well, we are joined by two remarkable guests today who will help us unpack this issue from both a behavioral standpoint and an organizational perspective. First, help me welcome Dr. Louina Bayer. She's the CEO of Civility Experts Incorporated, an award-winning author and internationally recognized authority in workplace civility. With over 2 decades of research, publications, and leadership, Dr. Liu has helped organizations in 48 countries reshape toxic environments into respectful, high-performing cultures. Also joining us today is Mr. Frank Ahinkra, a behavioral HR professional and EAP consultant with deep expertise in applied behavioral analysis, mental well-being, and workplace culture. Frank uses behavioral science to help organizations improve performance, retention, and psychological safety. Viewers, feel free to share your thoughts, feel free to share your comments, feel free to put in any information in the comment section. We will be glad to read them out. We will be glad to know where you are joining us from, and we definitely will answer the questions along the line as and when they come in. Help me welcome Dr. Liu and Frank on this platform. Hi, Doc. Hi, Frank. Trust we
Hello.
are all doing well.
Hi, Sophie. Yes, we are doing very well. I hope you're also fine.
By God's grace, I'm blessed. All right. Thanks so much for making it. And we'll want to zoom in straight to the topic for today, that is workplace incivility and its impact on, employees and the organization as a whole. So, Dr. Liu, to begin with, what exactly is workplace incivility and how does it differ from more overt forms of misconduct like bullying or harassment? And if you could kindly share some common examples just to let us understand exactly what it is.
Sure. Thanks so much, Sophie. So, to give you a sense of it, I think it's easier to define civility, which, in by our definition, civility experts, to put simply is positive people treatment. So incivility would be everything that is not, pardon me, incivility would be everything that is not positive people treatment. And the height of incivility is things like harassment or behaviors that we can overtly categorize as, say, bullying. But for the most part, any behavior, including something as simple as eye rolling, being late, not properly engaging, not preparing, some of the things you mentioned at the onset of the program would constitute incivility at the low end of the continuum. And then all of the behaviors that we identify as uncivil fit somewhere on that continuum. And I think a key problem, and I suspect we'll get into this a little bit today, is that many people don't understand that depending on the context, the situation, the consistency with which a behavior is exhibited, something considered intangible or simple like eye rolling can in fact have significant impact. So the little things over time that create a workplace culture and define what we would call a toxic or nourishing workplace.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Doc. Thanks so much. Yeah, they may look so small, things like, like you mentioned, the eye rolling and certain acts of rudeness. Certain acts of rudeness, yeah. They are very subtle, but they do have an impact. And I think to add to what you said, like colleagues ignoring your greeting. You greet someone and they just ignore you as though you did not pass by. I'm sure those will fall under that.
Yes, did you know that feeling invisible, which means a lack of verbal or visual acknowledgement in the first 2 minutes of interaction with people, was perceived as one of the top three things that causes a lack of psychological safety in some of our Canadian research? So something as simple as ignoring people over time can have tremendous impact. It's not always the big stuff that we can put in a neat little box under the category of bullying or harassment.
Wow, that's awesome. That's true. Thank you so much, Doc, for sharing that. And just to add to that, some behaviors like these, they may not necessarily violate our company policies, but they obviously will impact and affect the individuals working for the organizations. And as HR practitioners, as team leaders, as business leaders, we need to know that whatever is not addressed becomes accepted. And whatever is accepted will automatically become culture. So it's something we will need to really take into consideration. Well, speaking about culture, I just want us to explore some minor issues that could create major issues, especially on this topic. So, Frank, we often hear about the big issues in the workplace and we normally deal with them. Why should organizations be concerned about seemingly small acts of rudeness? And some of the examples we just cited.
All right. Thank you very much, Sophie, and nice seeing you, Dr. Bea. Yes, as she rightly said, or as Dr. Bea said, incivility is, kind of, it's mild. It's, in a mild form, and it's not as loud as the others, like bullying and harassment. So, organizations actually overlook that, as you rightly said. But again, well, our concern here is, if it is one time instance, fine. As humans, we can all step on people's toes one way or the other. But its cumulative nature is what, becomes an issue, and that is what organizations, need to take care of. So, yes, it is mild, or they can go unnoticed. However, if it becomes, I used to say that behavior is contagious. So when one begins to exhibit a certain behavior and it is not addressed, you realize that other people will begin to mimic or copy similar behavior, and then it tends to erode trust, as you said, and that is where, I mean, the company people feel that the place is toxic because when rudeness, I mean, the place is everybody is exhibiting rudeness at the workplace, people do not feel free or comfortable to express their views or opinions or whatever bothers them. So, yes, it is very small compared to the others, but it has significant impact, which organizations need to be aware of.
Thank you so much, Frank, for throwing much more light in that angle. Trust doesn't erode overnight. I mean, it fades with every overlooked comment, every unchecked tone, and the way we feedback or react or respond to others. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on that. And we will encourage viewers to kindly let us know if you are with us. Let us know where you are watching us from. And if you have any comment or any question, feel free to drop it in the comment section. And we will be more than willing, more than glad to read them out. Thank you so much. And we will continue. Doc, on the same issue with what we are talking on, what will you say is the tangible impact of workplace incivility on an organization's bottom line? Can it really be quantified?
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the reasons why experts like Frank and I, and we're so busy, because increasingly people understand that civility is a measurable competency. For 30 years, we've been teaching a competency framework at Civility Experts, our teams around the world, helping people understand that there are 4 underpinning skills. We've done a huge amount of research, and it's grounded in other people's research. And we know that you can, in fact, measure behavior. And for example, Pearson and Porath, who are often cited in civility work, found that 50% of business communications need not happen at all, that they do not contribute in a positive way to workplace culture. They're either disrespectful, incomplete, unclear, um, misaligned with protocol and process, and so on. But 50% of workplace communications, that's a lot of time wasted, and time is money. So they actually have a formula, a numeric formula you can use once you've assessed the specific behaviors and how much time, for example, you're wasting. But Weber Chadwick, we quote in all of our books, has done a ton of neat research about the metrics and the bottom line impact. So everything from efficiencies to safety metrics to workplace morale to retention to productivity to bottom line revenue, we see that we can tie back to incivility. And you mentioned something that, building on what Dr. Frank said too, about most often a general workplace culture survey, where we find high incivility, we find high mistrust. So, I mean, at the root of it is trust. And, there's 𝐒𝐫𝐨𝐝 and others, a lot of work on trust. But we see that silence is permission. And where there's a lack of accountability and we let the little things slide, a little bit of lateness, lazy dress code, all of those seemingly insignificant little things where we let that slide, that they pile up into a measurable impact. And once you cross a tipping point, Carl Albright has a scale where he measures toxicity in the workplace. Once you pass a tipping point, it's very difficult to rebuild culture in workplaces. So it is permission, as Frank said. Once you allow it, it's very difficult to claw it back.
That's much information shared there, and yes, it's something that organizations do pay for. Thank you so much, Doc, for sharing that. Many organizations unknowingly pay the price. I mean, for these issues when left unchecked, and some of the ways they do pay for these are Disengagement from team members. So you realize team members are no longer engaged. There's less collaboration from team members. There is high turnover. There is absenteeism. And people are no longer as productive or performing as they used to be. So those are some of the ways that it affects eventually organizations. And I love a quote by Simon Sinek, and he said something about when people feel safe, they collaborate, and when they do not, they protect themselves, and that leads into disengagement, and they begin to shield themselves because they feel that it's more of a toxic environment, so they need to protect themselves. Thank you so much, Doc, for sharing the impact on organizations. And now, speaking of people and how they bear this, Frank, who will we say are most likely to be the target of workplace incivility? And are there certain power dynamics at play?
Yes, there are power dynamics of obviously, and to talk of people, I mean the targets or victims. I would say generally everybody can be a victim of workplace incivility or incivility in general, but research has shown that women and minority groups are those who are mostly affected, and incivility or workplace incivility actually is a kind of downward. It's a kind of downward, that is from top to down or to the bottom. So in our Ghanaian or African context, for instance, submission is very high, and like in the account setting, for instance, we used to say something like opening default, meaning the adult or the elderly person doesn't go wrong. So if you even see an adult person or your parent, for instance, say something that you are not happy about, you can talk back, and that translates into the workplace. We highly criticize or I mean, give negative feedback to our supervisors, but they are able to do that easily. And that trend also translates into incivility. So it is, even as much as a subordinate can be rude to a supervisor or a manager, it does not mostly often, I mean, it does not mostly happen like a manager being rude to a subordinate. And when it happens like that, because of the power dynamics that comes, it shields the subordinate or the employee. So I mean, summarize by saying everybody, I mean, can be a victim of incivility, but then subordinates or those at the lower level of the organization are those who mostly, I mean, feel the impact.
Oh, I see. I see. Thank you so much, Frank. They do feel the impact. I mean, there certainly is some power dynamics at play when it comes to workplace incivility. And it's something that people sometimes do not even realize. I can see Kojo Mensa online, and he says, great topic. Violet Ahinkra watching from Ghana, Cape Coast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Let's share the link and invite others to join. This is a platform where we can learn, unlearn, and relearn, sharing topics and insights that's going to help us in our career and our professional journey. Let's do well to invite others to join us on the session. Thank you so much for your thoughts. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comment section, and we will be more than willing to have them attended to. All right. Doc, just based on what Frank said, is it possible for someone to be uncivil without intending to be? And yeah, is it possible for them to be uncivil without intending to be? And can you also explain the concept of ambiguous intent when it comes to incivility?
Yes, thank you. So absolutely, I believe people can behave badly without intending to or without recognizing that they've offended in some way or breached a policy or a social protocol. I think that that happens quite often. I don't think it's an excuse for incivility, though. I think there's a point when we're adults at work, and my sense is most people know better, but for a variety of reasons, they don't do better. Some of it's a lack of will, some of it's a lack of skill. And this concept of ambiguous, um, just behaving, you know, ambiguous intent, meaning that a person wasn't aware. So that means that they're disqualified from accountability or punishment. I can speak about our North American, I'm from Canada, and most of our labor laws, our human rights, our employment regulations, the written rules around even the way we behave socially in the community are grounded in the notion that as adults, the intent doesn't matter. In workplace, we're held accountable for the impact of our behavior. So there's a point where I can say, sorry, I didn't mean it, or I didn't know. But the fact is, you're still accountable. So, if I was drunk driving and I hit somebody and injured them or worse, I can't just say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. I didn't realize it was hurtful. There's a point where we have to start holding people accountability and clarifying by our policy and performance evaluations what the expectations are. I would say that the bigger picture, and Frank may be able to echo this a little bit. When we look at the psychology of workplace behavior, I do understand that a person can have a um, conscious viewpoint or perception, a belief, that everybody's equal, for example, and concurrent with that, have an unconscious bias that is contrary, that they may not even realize. So I think the bigger picture is that a lot of us don't even truly kind of look at ourselves. You talked about emotional intelligence. We don't really know what the motivation or intention is behind our behavior. So it's very difficult to resolve the motivation, and we get caught up in that. But at work, it really doesn't matter. You have to be held accountable for the impact of the behavior. At least that's our perspective at Civility Experts.
Wow. Wow. Thank you, thank you, thank you. The impact is what matters, not just the intent.
Right.
Because, yeah, so it's not just about saying, I just didn't mean that. That's what I actually intended to communicate. But the impact is something that we will need to look into. So, last week we delved on emotional intelligence, and as we are well aware, it's not just about what you meant, it's also about managing yourself and others responsibly. So we will need to know how to manage others and ourselves, even in our everyday conversations, communications with others. So sometimes we pass comments of "I'm just being myself," "I'm just being honest," and it can be very brutal if we do not have it measured, and the impact could be damaging. Thank you, Doc. Thank you so much. Doc Frank, will you want to say something to that?
Oh yes. I mean, Doc has said it all, but I mean, just to add, like yes, you can't say what's the word, like the intent.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is, you can be on several because on several without being intentional, and that is what I mean. The basis of the whole instability. That is what makes it go unnoticed or become subtle. So it's like being in a meeting and I mean pressing your phone and chatting with somebody. You don't have. It's not you. One will say that I'm not being intentional by fidgeting my phone or not listening to you or something. Look, not looking, giving you eye
Connected.
contact. Eye
Yeah.
contact. That is the word. But it has. I mean, implications, which means what I'm telling you it doesn't seem to have a value. You don't seem to be interested in what I am saying. Whilst to me, it is very important for what I mean in what I am giving out. So yes, of course it is. People can go on server without being intentional, and that is the most. I mean, um, one of the significant aspects of it.
Wow. Wow. Thank you so much. Thank you. I have a question here from Violet Ahenkra, and the question is, please, I want to know whether uncivilized employees are as a result of low salary or remuneration. I'm sure the question, yeah, has got to do with when people are being uncivil. Is that as a result of low salary? Could there be some triggers that cause people to probably become uncivil?
All
I think,
right. Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
Doc?
Oh,
Okay,
Go
fine.
ahead.
okay, I will go and then Doc will add up. All right. Thank you very much, Violet, for your question and also joining us. Yes. I will start by saying the workplace is a society within a society. So people come in, I mean, we come to the workplace from various places, our homes, and we come there with our own behaviors and culture and beliefs. So what usually shapes us is the workplace culture, the values of the workplace, and how effective or vibrant the workplace culture is what actually shapes the employees. So people can be highly paid yet uncivil because that is the behavior they have acquired from childhood. If they are about 40 years, I mean 40 years old, that is the behavior they might have acquired when they were about 15 years. So it is a behavior from home translated or brought to the workplace. However, I would not also say that having um, factors, negative factors like low salary or not being appreciated for your effort would not also contribute. That is also a contributing factor. Of course, if you work hard and you are not being appreciated or your effort is not being noticed or recognized, it can have, I mean, impact on how you behave. And of course, one of the consequences will be to lead on several lifestyle.
All right. Thank you so much,
And
Frank. Doc,
I
will you
believe
want to?
if Doc may have something to add.
Well, I think there's a couple of different perspectives. So first of all, I agree with Frank. We look at how Maslow's hierarchy of needs. How if people's physiological needs aren't met, they can't manage financially. They don't have a break, so they can't manage their stress or their lunch. The bathroom is 20 minutes away, so they eat up their whole break going to the when the physiological needs aren't met and the perceptions of fair treatment, just in terms of day-to-day experience, aren't met, people do sometimes default to their lesser self and behave badly. So on the one hand, I understand how it does happen, but on the other hand, it's not the employer's responsibility outside of the requirements of the law to make me happy at work. I, as an individual, if I perceive an unfairness or a slight, I have HR, I have avenues. To me, this quiet quitting and this idea that, two wrongs make a right, I perceive I was treated badly, so I'm going to behave badly as a result, that's an excuse, and it impacts my coworkers, it impacts, the organization's profitability and so on. I think we all have a responsibility to use the tools we have. If we're unhappy, I signed that work contract at that pay rate. If I'm unhappy after the fact, that doesn't give me license to underperform or behave badly or show up in a toxic negative mood every day. So I think it's both sides. Employers, we all contribute. we all have to kind of understand what the standards are, what the expectations and the rules are. I mean, the fact that I'm paid poorly, that's what we have unions for. That's what we have labor laws, to protect us a little bit. But I think a lot of times people will take some small slight. My coworker got a parking spot close to the door and I have to park at the other end of the parking lot. They'll use one perceived incivility as an excuse for contributing in a very significant way to overall toxicity. And I personally think that there's a problem with that. We've gotten into an era where many people are looking for reasons to be insulted, and they're using that as an excuse for bad behavior. So, I just think that there's two sides to it. That's all.
All right, all right, all right. There are two sides to this point, and thanks so much for your thoughts, Frank. Thank you so much, Doc, for also sharing this. Violet, I'm sure your question has been well answered, and I'm sure that's what you meant in the comment section. Thank you so much, viewers, for being with us, and kindly continue to drop in your questions in the comment section, and we'll want to take a quick break and then share some information, and we will be back to continue with the topic. Thank you. So, we have an upcoming session using analytics to measure HR's contribution. As you can see on the screen, using analytics to measure HR's contribution. And it's scheduled for the 29th to the 31st of July this month from 8:30 to 3:30 p.m. And we will urge everyone to register for this wonderful session that is going to be very, very, very insightful. We will urge you to kindly follow the link. We place a link on the platforms. Kindly do well to fill the forms and then register towards the program. Well, we also have another event coming up by Sedat Consult for kids. It's captioned the Kids Leadership Academy, Developing Future Leaders Today. And it's happening on the 9th of August next month. 9th of August next month. And it's for kids between the ages of 6 and 19 years old. Kindly let us do well to register our kids. The course model is going to capture critical and creative thinking, emotional intelligence for kids. Yeah, kids equally need to learn that even at this stage. And creative writing skills, communication and public speaking skills, financial literacy, digital literacy, and many, many, many more. And the registration fee is 1,000 Ghana cedis. It's taking care of lunch, snacks, and learning materials. Lastly, before we go back to the topic, we have the Sedat HR Digest soiree coming up. This is an event that has been spoken about for some time now, and it's on Friday, the 1st of August 2025. It's on Friday, the 1st of August 2025. So let us do well to schedule that, mark the date, and let's be present to network with other professionals. It's a Friday evening from 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. Let's do well. We've shared the link on all platforms. We'll urge us all to register. Let's do well to register. It's just a few weeks away, and the fee is 200 cedis. The venue is the British Council Auditorium. The British Council Auditorium. Friday, the 1st of August 2025. Let us do well to register ahead of time so that we can plan and have a wonderful event. It is an event to distress, unwind, dance, and simply have fun. Let's do well. Invite people, invite your team members, and let's make it a day, an event worth remembering. Thank you so much for taking note of that. We will share further information on all platforms so that you can be well abreast with the information. Thank you. I can see some viewers online, and Jerome says very refreshing topic to ease office challenges. Yeah, yeah. Very refreshing topic. And I can see Charles. Yeah, great message. Yeah, it's very insightful. Thank you so much, sir, for your feedback, and we are glad you are following us. Kindly keep your comments coming through. Let us know where you are watching us from. Let us have your concerns. Let us have your questions, and we will answer them. All right. So we want to take off and continue with a discussion. Yes, we want to continue with our discussion on workplace incivility. Yes, so we've answered Violet on that, and we just want to dive into another angle on how incivilities affect employees' mental and physical health. In fact, does it really affect people's mental health and physical health? Frank, you may want to help us answer that.
Right. Thank you very much once again, Sophie. Yes, I say incivility is like this small animal, termite, the animal that eats wood. They are very, very, very tiny, but very powerful.
Yeah.
So that is how incivility is. Um, they can, I mean, they have negative impact on productivity, performance, and organizational or the company's bottom line. It doesn't, its effect does not, or its effects don't end there. They also have effect on the individual's both mental and physical health. How does this happen? One typical example I would give, for instance, is just yesterday, I was talking with one of my mates, and she made mention of um, a grade she had that she wasn't happy or she was not expecting. And if I'm quoting her, she was like, in fact, it really brought me down, it broke me. And some people, a lot of people are like that with minor comments that the perpetrator, when I say the perpetrator, the one saying or who came out with a comment might not see it as an offensive, can have a long way or significant impact on the target or the victim. And this is how it happens. It increases, it has potential increase on the target's um, emotional health. So it can bring anxiety. People can feel depressed, and it can even lead to burnout because, as my expert, who is a great author of incivility books here, Dr. 𝐒𝐫𝐤𝐥𝐚𝐜𝐞 will say that when people experience incivility, one of the ways it affect them is some can go the whole day thinking about the incident,
Yeah.
and that obviously leads to it drains us emotionally or psychologically. So these are the psychological or the mental health aspect: increased anxiety, depression, burnout, and even reduced self-esteem. So imagining talking to somebody and the person doing his or her own thing, And in our context, again, some people used to say, oh, we listen with our ears, not our eyes. It's a common phrase that we have. So when you are talking with, to somebody and the person is giving an attention to something else, it devalues whatever you are saying. And some people, if you feel that you are making, um, important, you are sending important message across, and the person is not listening, it brings a lot of questions which can even lead to self-esteem. And the physical health aspect is also, can be from sleep disturbances, because in as much as somebody can go a long way to think about an issue at the workplace, the same way that it can also affect their sleep when they are at home. Research also indicates that it leads to headache and even digestive issues. So, because it's us, what happens to us psychologically can also have impact on our immune system. And these are some of the effects that it has, incivility has on the individual employee.
Wow, that's so spot on, spot on. We've seen how chronic exposure to incivility can lead to anxiety, stress, sleep issues, low self esteem, burnout, and emotional fatigue. Thank you so much, Frank, for sharing that. And some employees even begin to exhibit that by working in silence, and they begin to avoid eye contact with others because they do not want to have anything to do with, probably like you said, the perpetrators of such an action. And some begin to take unnecessary days off because it's probably having an impact on their wellness, and they will need to have some time just to move away from the environment that keeps reminding them of how they feel. So I do agree with that. Thank you so much. Like I said, it's spot on, explaining how it affects the mental and the physical health of employees. So I know that when people don't feel well emotionally, normally they can't give their best. They can't contribute as expected. They can't fully show up. And they may even be physically present, but their performance will show that their body is just there, but their mind is somewhere else. And as leaders, as team leaders, we will need to take note of that and be able to make the environment much more friendly and very, very positive, less toxic for our people. All right, Dr. Liu, I'm wondering how this can, should I say, what's the return on investment for organizations that invest in civility training and initiatives?
Yeah, so building on what you and Frank have just said, I think workplaces don't take some of this psychological safety aspect or this anxiety and depression and how people are feeling at work very seriously. So we try to convey it in terms of, to your point, return on investment and impact. We see, for example, in manufacturing and healthcare, when employers understand that it can take up to 4 hours for an individual to return to what's described as a steady state, where their parasympathetic system re-engages and they can make good decisions and so forth. So leaders need to recognize that, the impact is whoever is driving a truck or prescribing medication or on the front line with dangerous equipment, the incidences that are going to happen, the overt safety impact. There's a tremendous measurable return on your investment when you teach your leadership how to observe and be present in a meaningful way to that state of people. When they understand, how to recognize cues that somebody is feeling insulted or injured, when you can teach them to recognize that, as Watson Wyatt said, up to 20% more engage, 4 times the number of people will engage more fully. When workplaces understand that the cost of legal lawsuits, the cost of, having to pay somebody out because they cut off their finger because they were upset that the boss screamed at them and embarrassed them in front of their coworkers. We see that embedding civility into your workplace policies and procedures impacts everybody in a positive way. But sometimes workplaces don't pay attention until you can highlight and prove the bottom line business metric, profitability. So, of course, they care about their people. But at the end of the day, if the organization or the company isn't profitable, then how the people feel isn't going to matter anyway. So I think the bottom line impact, we have to tie it to the metrics for workplaces. They have to understand the cost to efficiency and error rates and lawsuits and turnover, etc.
Thank you, Doc. Thank you, Doc. The cost is very expensive, and I think you've mentioned them. Disengagement. I mean, you lose out on people. High turnover. The cost is very, very, very high, and organizations that invest in this will end up seeing higher retention, innovation, and team effectiveness. And John Maxwell said something about the fact that you don't build a business, you build people and they build the business. Yeah, that's a quote by John Maxwell. And when people feel disrespected, they either disengage or they leave. So sometimes we need to find out why is talent walking out uh, of business. I mean, why will anyone just leave? Definitely, there should be some underlying issues. And like we began, these incivil actions are very subtle, but they do impact sharply, and their impact can be very, very disruptive. So people may disengage or they may leave. So we'll need to know how we can be very much intentional in avoiding all that. I can see Godana Darko. She Godana Darko. Good evening, watching from Kumasi. All right, thank you so much, Godana. Kindly let us have your questions in the comment section. We will need to get every information from Frank and sorry about that, from Frank and Dr. Liu before they leave us. So any question you have with regards to workplace incivility, please do well to post them there. Let's see how best we can have them addressed, answered, so that we can go to the workplace this week and be able to avoid all these subtle actions. Thank you so much, Doc and Frank, for this. Well, Frank, what are some of the steps an employee should take if they are experiencing or witnessing incivility? Are there any steps or actions that employees can take if they experience that from either peers, colleagues, even leadership? What are some of the things they can do?
All right, thank you very much, Sophie. Yes, addressing workplace incivility is organization-wide effort. Everybody, has a role to play, or everybody, I mean, contribute to addressing that. It's not only from management. They may have the policies, but employees or the workers would also have their roles to play. So one of the ways to address when management, has made policies or tried to make the place respectful, employees can also play their part. So when an employee experiences disrespectful or rude behavior from another person, being a colleague, a supervisor, or whoever, I'll say the first step is to approach the perpetrator if it is safe and appropriate. So in this case, I can use Sophie, for instance. Um, we might have, as we are having a meeting, you interrupted when I was talking. So after the meeting, I can approach you in a nice way. Sophie, when you interrupted me when during the meeting. When you do that, I am unable to make my point or cut my point across, and it doesn't help me. I feel uncomfortable with that. So I would be happy if subsequent meetings you allow me to finish making my point. So that would be one step or the first step to take. That is if it is appropriate and safe to do that. Another thing to also step to also consider is to also assess the situation. And I would say that would have even been a first thing if it is a one-time behavior or a pattern of behavior, something that is being noted for. So we will say, oh, this person, this is how he or she is. So if it's a pattern of behavior, you also need to assess that. And another factor is that is being conscious in addressing this. It's also to document, because if it is a pattern of behavior, they need to document the instance where it occurred. The time and even the comment or the exact action that took place. And then you also seek support from a trusted colleague. One of the things that incivility talks about is um, gossip is also part of incivility. So people talking, about behind people is also, an it's a rude behavior. So when somebody confined in a colleague, it has to stick between the two of you. So you find a trusted colleague and then you discuss it with. And from there, or I would say the last resort would be to report to HR. And that is where the documentation would come to play, because you cannot just go and report that so and so has been rude to me without pinpointing what actually happened. Because as we said, it can be unintentional. Sorry, not yeah. The person might not be aware of it. So if you don't document to state the time, the place, and the exact thing that happened, the person might say, "Oh, I'm not sure I'm the one," or "I'm not sure I did that." So these are the steps that I think employees can take to help when they feel they've been victims of incivility.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. Doc, will you want to kindly shed some light, further information on this?
Sure. So I agree with everything Frank said. I wish people, number one, had the confidence to use some of those tools and resources and seek out a trusted friend, and that their communication was good enough to go to HR and so on. I find in, our, again, referencing Canada, we've got on average 65 cultural groups in most workplaces, backgrounds, 6 generations. And in Canada, we recognize up to 12 gender categories. So there's a lot of diversity. And oftentimes in larger workplaces, we focus more on behavior. My sense is, as a supervisor or business owner, I can't change people's attitude when they come to the workplace, but I can, under the law, manage their behavior and set specific expectations. So if I go to the trouble of having a very comprehensive code of conduct, if I explain in a job description what respect looks like, I mean, too often I see job descriptions that say, be courteous, but it doesn't say that the expectation in this workplace is you acknowledge people verbally or visually. Ignoring people is unacceptable. We don't say, you may not wear see-through clothes or short shorts or thongs to work. We just say, dress business casual. We don't say what respect looks like. On time means 10 minutes before the start time for Zoom and other meetings. We just say be on time. And then we're surprised that we don't get behavior that meets our expectations, but we haven't actually taken the time. I really believe most people are busy and tired and stressed. And if we clearly define the expectations, we can offset probably 80% of workplace incivility. Because if I know that if I'm called in for 3 or 4 infractions, we described to you what respect meant, we showed you the do not use list. These are aspects of language or verbiage. This is what we consider profanity that's not allowed at work. These are comments and things that we perceive as racist that you may not use. You may not touch people. If we're really explicit in our expectations, it's easier to hold people accountable and teach them to be competent in terms of their relational skills. Teach them, what respectful communication looks and sounds and smells like. We just don't do enough of that. My view, and most of our work, we do more working with workplaces to define their policies and procedures, which is significantly more time and cost effective than spending hours and hours and hours teaching grown-ups at work how to be nice to each other. So, I think it depends on the context. There's different approaches, but I'm 110% focused on the competency piece. And it sounds a little cold-hearted, I guess. But at the end of the day, organizations with 10, 15, sometimes up to 20,000 employees, um, people say a lot of things, but what they do tells you how they really feel and, what they really believe. So I tend to focus on actions and outcomes and really the competency piece, which sounds a little harsh, maybe, but I understand HR has a kind of a different take on things, and necessarily so, right?
Well said, Doc. Thank you so much, Doc and Frank. We need to be able to document what's happening and communicate it directly. That is, if it is safe to do so, and be able to also escalate it to a trusted leader or to HR if it becomes something consistent. And I like the point that we normally do not give comprehensive descriptions to things that we probably call do's and don'ts or are codes of conduct. So we tell people you need to respect, you need to be courteous, you need to be on time when you have to be at this meeting. But we assume that everyone should understand what that means. But on time to someone may be something else. I mean, some minutes after the expected time, the actual time. And in a Ghanaian context, we know issues we have. I'm sure, Frank, you can relate to that because, of course, you know. So we need to, Doug, I agree with that. We need to be clear in our explanations. So when we tell people this is how you should act, we need to be able to give clear and examples of what you are expected to do. Thank you so much for such information. I can see a question here. Our time is running against us. I can see a question here. Can we identify these uncivilized employees during interviews before we employ them? Frank said it may be a behavior acquired long ago. So, can we see them during interviews? I have an NGO and about to employ, so help me. I can understand the question. So are these traits that we can identify ahead of time so that we sift them out even before hiring them? Because once we hire them, I mean the whole issue, it's now a different ball game. So how do we identify these issues, these people, so that we try not to employ them? Or if we do, what's the aftermath? What's the way out? Violet says, I have an NGO and she's about to employ. So she needs to make a good decision in her hiring process?
So I can tell you really quickly. Sorry, Frank, I'll be super quick. I say yes. If you were to have every employee before you hire them do a social intelligence survey and understand, or maybe emotional intelligence too, but if you were to test their psychosocial intelligence, if high social intelligence means that they can read nonverbal, verbal, tonal cues, and they're more present, so they're going to recognize context and situations and not make social mistakes. If they have low social intelligence, which you can teach them out of low social intelligence, they will more likely behave in an inappropriate social way. Unwittingly maybe, but it's a competency issue. So if you measure the competencies tied to civility before you hire, I firmly believe you can offset incivility at work. Yeah.
All right. All right. Thank you. I can see Hilary Jerome's comment. I believe one of the ways to minimize office incivility is to bring mentorship programs at offices. That's what Jerome is stating. All right, Doc. All right, Frank. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And we'll want to draw the curtains. And just before we wrap up, what would you say is one key takeaway you want us to remember about the fight against workplace incivility? What would you want us to know? Frank, can you share with us? Then Doc will have you.
All right. I would say that workplace in in today's world of work where every company is fighting over um, competent and skillful employees, workplace incivility is a key issue that we need to address, or the behavior at workplace is one thing that we need to pay critical attention to, as much as we look at their professional skills, because one behavior can erode, or can have significant impact at the workplace and even change the values that the which becomes the foundation in which the company was built on. So companies should take in much effort to address workplace incivility by leading a talk, not just policies pasted on the walls of the company. Our values, be respectful, and all that is about management leading the talk and expecting employees to follow, becoming role models. Because I say that, or there is a saying that goes that followers follow the footsteps of their leaders. So let's exhibit a respectful workplace, and it will translate into the profit that we want to see.
Thank you so much, Frank. Doc, will you want to share your thoughts on this? Your final
Yes,
comment?
thank you. So I agree with everything Frank said. What I would say really quickly is that the only thing lacking more than competency and civility in our modern day workplace is courage and leadership. And so, as Frank has said, I really think we need to choose civility, do the right thing, even when it's difficult, make the hard choices, call people on their bad behavior, raise our personal standard. Courage, just like we said, that low trust makes high incivility, high courage makes high civility. It makes our communities and workplaces healthier and better. So, to me, it's about courage. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you,
Right.
thank you. Frank,
Yes,
yes,
Sophie, before we leave finally, I think I would want to acknowledge or thank Dr. Liu. And if she can even throw a little light on what she does, because she's a civility expert trainer, and she has written books that I knew one of them inspired me to have my thesis done on workplace incivility during my master's program in HR. So she is an expert and she travels around a lot. So she can share just briefly on it, and then those companies that would want to start, changing their workplace can reach out.
Thank you
Sure.
so much, Frank. And I'm so flattered that your thesis, and we did communicate a little bit by email about that over the years. I've been at it since 1999. I live, breathe. My whole life is civility. I'm a workplace civility expert. I think we have 32 books published now, certification for all kinds of things. But for people who are starting out, we have lots of free resources. You can find us. I'm Lou at civilityexperts.com. I'm happy to share any of that. We have, thank you so much for that, Frank and Sophie. It's really been a privilege. Thank you.
Thank you, Doc. Thank you for being here and sharing such insightful moments with us. And we'll surely be able to follow up on your platforms and be able to learn one or two and connect accordingly, so that for businesses that need your services, in moving from a toxic environment into one that is very responsive and respectful, it's going to really do well for the culture of businesses. Thank you so much, Doc and Frank. It's been great having you, and it's been a powerful and enriching session, and you have poured out your expertise in this dialogue. Incivility is not just a behavior issue, it's equally something everyone's job, and leadership also has a role to play, because if it affects the culture, it becomes the norm and it becomes accepted by all. And Napoleon Hill says that self discipline begins with mastery of thoughts. If you can't manage what you think, you can't manage what you do. So that's just a reminder. We need to be intentional about how we treat others, not just because it is nice, but because it is necessary for us to be mindful in how we treat people. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we will encourage everyone to follow Sedat Consult and Sedat HR Digest on all platforms for more value-packed sessions that challenge and empower our professional journey. Until next time, let us lead with clarity, respect, and emotional wisdom. Have a fruitful week, and God bless us all. Shalom.
Thank you.
Thank you.